Hey, good morning, gasaholics. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition, and I'm back. One of the things I want to talk about is one of my most favorite pony cars. Now, pony car is a name that was established when the popularity of the Mustang that came out in 1964 was so great, it created a whole class of cars. But the Mustang was not the first pony car. Yes, it's responsible for the name, and I'm kind of glad that the original pony car did not get the credit that the Mustang did, because we'd be driving around in a bunch of fish cars. That's right, fish. The first pony car to go into production was the Barracuda. Now, it beat the Mustang to market by a mere 2 weeks, and it was one of those things where Ford didn't keep a secret that they were building this Mustang, and Chrysler was the first one to step up to try and challenge that supremacy. It didn't work. Although the Barracuda did sell reasonably well when you look at the size of the Chrysler Corporation at the time, it was not a stellar hit. Ford used the Falcon as the base for its Mustang, and Chrysler used the Plymouth Valiant as the base of the Barracuda. Now, it shared a lot of sheet metal with the Valiant. The Mustang didn't share any sheet metal with a Mustang or with a Falcon. But the Barracuda was a low dollar because at that point in time, Chrysler seemed to think the turbine engine was the wave of the future, and it was going to be the savior of the Chrysler Corporation. Didn't quite work, and although the turbine engine was a nice exercise in futility, it really drained a lot of income and finances from Chrysler. So the production and the design of the Barracuda became very limited, and basically it was a fastback Valiant. It had some interesting features. Now, in 1964, April 1st is when it was introduced. It had the base engine of a 170 cubic inch slant six. Now, compare that to the Mustang. It had a 170 cubic inch regular inline six. It had a 220 or 200 inch option on the Mustang. The Barracuda had a 225 cubic inch optional six cylinder. Okay. Horsepower wise, about the same on the six cylinders. The Mustang had a base V8 engine of a 260 cubic inch engine. Barracuda had 273 cubic inches. But the Mustang had a 289 as an option. Barracuda had no other optional V8 engine. And the 273, which was unique to the Valiant and the Barracuda, only had 180 horsepower in two-barrel form. Now, the four-barrel 273 didn't come out until 1965. And in 1965, the Commando version had higher compression, higher lift cam, a four-barrel carburetor, and was rated at 235 cubic inches. Gone in 1965 was also push buttons. Yes, 64 was the last year of the push-button automatic drive transmission. So they went to a column shift with an optional floor shift. 273 cubic inches, 235 horsepower, spirited, but I've driven one. Not spirited enough. They did have a 4-speed option. You could get that on the 6 cylinders and the V8s, which made it kind of interesting. Now, the biggest thing about the Barracuda was that 14 cubic foot rear window, helped in production by the company called PPG. And PPG we know more for paint, but they were actually a glass manufacturer as well. And they were able to manufacture that glass with the least amount of distortion at the bends. Now, in 1965, minor changes, as I said, more horsepower. That was it. The 170 cubic inch for the United States market disappeared. In Africa, strangely enough, where the Barracuda was called the Valiant, and it was called the Valiant here too until mid-1965, it was a performance car. And they got a hefty 225 cubic inch six that had 190 horsepower. Now, go back a little bit in time, and the Dodge Dart and the Plymouth Valiant also had that basic engine, although there were some differences. They called it the Hyper Pack, and it was a 4-barrel, header, higher compression, higher lift cam, 6-cylinder. In the U.S. market, it had 225 horsepower. But in Africa, it only got a two-barrel, so it was 190 horsepower. Now we move on to 1966, which is my favorite year of the Barracuda, first gen. Now, what did they change? Sheet metal. All right, the doors stayed the same. Front fenders, grille, hood, those changed. Taillights changed. Minor changes, but more aesthetically pleasing to me. And I like the 66, and actually, I'd like to have a 66. Still, the engine options with the 225-6, the 273 with a two-barrel, and a 273 with a four-barrel, 235 horsepower. Still well below what was offered by Ford in the Mustang. And you got to remember, Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, no one else had gotten into the pony car field by that point. It was only Chrysler and Ford. Now, Chrysler still did an amicable job. They were selling, well, over 30,000 of these Barracudas per year. The first year, which was a half year, because they were introduced in April, they all sold just under 30,000. But sales continued to climb, and the Barracuda was still popular because, again, other than the Mustang, it was the only game in town, and these were still called pony cars. In 1967, using the same basic chassis as the Valiant, a total redesign of the Barracuda happened. Now you have three different models. A convertible, very limited, a notchback coupe, kind of notchback, it was just a short coupe, and the fastback, with a more conventional style fastback and smaller rear window. But the engine options, well, they somewhat improved. Gone was the 273 after 1967, replaced with a 318. Now, the 273 is kind of a unique engine as it doesn't share anything with previous 273s that were available in earlier Plymouths, nor the 318. Parts are unique to that engine. You can't just bolt on 318 parts to those. Hi, Shiloh. How are you doing this morning? But the Barracuda now was more stylish. Still looked kind of like a Valiant, but it was nicer. Now, my favorite is still a fastback. I got to tell you that. Convertibles, notchback, it's okay. We've got a few of those that come out to Irwindale on Thursday nights. You can check them out there. The 383 was now available. Very limited in numbers, but still there. It was available, and you could get it. In 1967, there's no side marker lamps because they weren't required yet, but in 1968 they were. So that's one of the ways of telling the difference between a 67 and a 68 Barracuda, because body-wise, they hadn't changed. So 68's got little round side markers. 69, they tweaked the grill a little bit and changed the lights, but it's still the basic body. And this is where the car became more of a pony car. It really looked stylish. Sales improved. In 67, the 225 was still the base six-cylinder engine. 273 was still there in 67, so I correct myself, but the 383 was now available. It was only rated at 280 horsepower because the Barracuda didn't allow for the same headers or exhaust manifolds in the big cars, so it was more restrictive. In 1968, the 273 was now replaced by the new 318. Now, it also had the 340, which again is a different motor, but performance-wise, the 340 is much better. The 383 Super Commando is now available with the same intake manifolds, camshaft, and cylinder heads that appeared on the Roadrunner. So horsepower should be about 335, right? Wrong. Exhaust manifolds, very restrictive. They rated the Barracuda at only 300 horsepower. So down a little bit, but I'll tell you what, 30 horsepower, who notices it? Right. Okay, you do. I know. Now, in 1968, Chrysler came out with the Hemi in about 50 of the Barracuda fastbacks only. This was a car to challenge the Mustangs and now the Camaro in the stock and super stock ranks. But there were only 50 made, just enough to homologate it and get NHRA to allow it to run. It was produced by Chrysler, but then sent to Hearst for the improvements and upgrades. It got fiberglass front fenders. It got a hood scoop. It got lightweight seats. It got lightweight glass. This was a race car. As a matter of fact, it was so much of a race car, it had a little sticker on it that said not for highway use. So it was a part number car. Chrysler was known for that. They did that with the Dodge Dart, right, Shiloh? And it became popular. Now, I talked about the South African version of the Barracuda, and in South Africa, the Valiant line of cars was a separate division. It wasn't part of Plymouth. They came out with a performance six-cylinder, 190 horsepower, 9.3 to 1 compression ratio, two-barrel carburetor versus the single barrel here in the States, more aggressive cam, low restriction exhaust, and they were called Savage GTs. And that was what they called the second-generation Barracudas. In 1969, well, the emphasis on performance started to grow, but also the mod look, or the looks of the day, the hippie craze, and they came out with a new option called the Mod Top. Yeah, Mod Top. I don't know how much performance you got out of it, Bunky, but and I've seen a few of these. It's a vinyl roof covering that had a floral pattern. It was available in 69 and 70, only on the notchback, not on the fastback, and you couldn't get it as convertible. In 1969, the 383 was upgraded to get to that 330 horsepower range, similar to the Barracudas. There was a new trim package called the Cuda. Now, a lot of people just refer to Barracudas as Cuda, but the only true Cudas are the factory performance Cudas. If it wasn't a performance Cuda, or Barracuda, it still said Barracuda. Which motors are considered Magnum? The ones that Chrysler labeled Magnum. So, Dylan, it's not a, there are no, I guess, Magnums was their marketing term for some of the big blocks with more performance. The original Barracuda performance engines were called Commando. All right, third generation. Now we've got a true pony car in appearance. Short rear deck, long hood. Now, the Barracuda totally redesigned. Didn't use anything from the Valiant. At 1970, though, Dodge now stepped into the fray with the Challenger, the original Challenger. They appeared similar. They didn't share much of anything. The Challenger had a longer wheelbase than the Barracuda. I still like the Barracuda better. Well, when Chrysler came back with the Challenger, there was no Barracuda alongside it. All right, so in 1970, the Barracuda was totally redesigned, and it was no longer part of the Valiant line. The original fastback design was deleted completely. There was a coupe and a convertible. All new body styles were built. There were shorter, wider versions of Chrysler's existing B platform. Now it's called the E body. Now, sharing this platform was the newly launched Challenger, as I said. However, no exterior sheet metal interchanged between the two cars. And the wheelbases, as I said, were different. The Barracuda was 2 inches shorter than the Challenger. Or actually, the wheelbase was shorter, yes. But the body was 5 inches longer on the Challenger. The Challenger was a bigger car. Now, strangely enough, they tried running this car, on both cars actually, in Trans Am. And the one that got the most publicity was the green and black ones that were driven by Sam Posey and Tony Adamowicz. They acid-dipped these things to get them as light as they could. As a matter of fact, the reason for the vinyl roof, they acid-dipped it a little too much, and the roof would cave. So they had to weld on a production hood, and to hide that, they put on a vinyl top. By the way, it only won one race in Trans Am, and really never did well. The engines would not stay together. Technology at the time, the 340 had to be de-stroked because it was a 5-liter class. So they had to get it down to just over 303, 304 cubic inches. Beginning in 1970 and ending in the 71 model, the Barracuda Coupe, the A93 model, had a 198 cubic inch slant 6. It's a strange motor. You found them more in Velaris at the time, or later on Velaris. So it was around, but it was only a 1-year engine in the Barracuda. Why they did that, no one knows. The Barracuda was still a neat-looking car. I liked it. But now you could get more with the 426. It wasn't a Hearst-assembled vehicle. This was actually from the factory. In 70 and 71, the Barracuda and the Barracuda Grand Coupe had 2 slant 6 engines. Yeah, the 198 I just talked about, and the 225 that persevered, as well as 4 different V8s. The 318 that they introduced earlier, a 383, yep, a 383 2-barrel, with a single exhaust and a 383 4-barrel with dual exhaust, still at the 330 range. The Cuda, here's the performance version, not the Barracuda, but the Cuda, 383 with 335 horsepower. What was different? Well, it was the same engine as the 383 Magnums that Dodge had, but other than that, it was pretty much the same, except restrictive exhaust manifolds again. And maybe that was the difference between the 330 and the 335 horsepower motors. Now, back was the six-pack. 290 horsepower is what it was rated at in the 340. It was higher than that. The 340 was the basis of the Trans Am engine. They de-stroked it a little bit. There was also a 440 now, 375 horsepower. The Super Commando 443 2-barrel, six-pack with 390 horsepower. And the 425 426 cubic inch Hemi. Very few of those. The 440 and the Hemi-equipped cars had upgraded suspensions, structural reinforcements that helped transfer the power to the road, and my favorite, the Sox and Martin cars. I loved watching those red, white, and blue Barracudas in the day. Sox and Martin, they were tough competitors in stock and super stock. Now, other Barracuda options included hood modifications, high-impact colors such as Limelight, Bahama Yellow, Tour Red, Lemon Twist, Curious Yellow, Vitamin C, In Violet, Sassy Grass, and Moulin Rouge. What do those colors look like? They're bright. Take a look at it. As I said, Swede Savage, Dan Gurney raced the AAR Barracudas back in the day. Now, this is the 1970 Trans Am Series. The car qualified for 3 pole positions, but did not win any Trans Am races. Dodge won at least one. The highest finish was second at Road Atlanta. 4 1970 Hemi Cudas were also successfully created and raced by Chrysler of France from 70 to 73. The works team of Henry Chiminin piloted the first car, and then it was sold to a friend and a privateer. So they tried to road race these cars in Europe. They didn't do too bad. There was a Hemi Cuda that won 4 French Group 1 class championships. So it did rather well, considering that lunk of iron in the front made them pretty nose-heavy. The Barracuda was changed slightly for 1971, grille and taillights, but some trim pieces, but it was basically the same. In 1971, the Barracuda engine options would remain the same as the 1970. And nothing exciting there. Like I said, V8s, 6s, but they were good. They were fun. I love those cars too, but those cars are a little too wide for me. I like the svelte, narrow 65, 66, 64, 65, 66 Barracudas. In 1972, with the advent of the emission standards now increasing and horsepower drops, Chrysler tried to do what they could to stylize the cars. The new grille and a single headlight, very similar to the 70 model, and 4 rectangular taillights in 72. The Barracuda would remain basically unchanged through 1974, the last year before it faded away in 1975. The variations, well, the big block engines were 383, 440, 426, heavy-duty suspensions, rear axles, larger tires, and wheels 15.7 were no longer offered. Additionally, the convertible model was dropped. Oh, gee. Now, remember the TV show Mannix? He drove a beautiful black convertible Barracuda, if I remember correctly. Well, a few late builds in 71 convertibles were made with 72 grills, and they were the back panel for Paramount Studios TV, like I said, Mannix, and the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch? I don't remember seeing one of the Brady Bunch. They had a station wagon, but who knows. Convenience and comfort options such as power seats, power windows, upgraded interiors. They actually had leather seats back then, too. And plush carpeting were dropped. No sense dolling these cars up. No one was buying those options. For 72, only 3 engine choices were offered. The 225-6, the base engine, the 318, and that could be had for both the Cuda and the Barracuda. Not much of a performance option at that point in time. A revised 340 detuned to meet emission standards came about. In 73, federally mandated safety bumpers were added, front and rear. Well, front anyway. Rear had to have those big blocks behind them. The 383 or 318 and 340s being the only engine choices, making them really anemic for the time. 74 was slightly more powerful. 360 came out. Okay. And it had 245 horsepower, but a bigger engine. It was heavier. Yeah. They were equipped with a Hurst 4-speed. You can get that. Made it to a 355 performance rear axle. But performance started going away. As with other American vehicles of the time, the progression decreased, and by 1975, the Barracuda and its kissing cousin, the Challenger, were gone. Chrysler reinvented the Challenger in 2003, but the Barracuda never returned because they got rid of the Plymouth division, which really was a better performance division for many years over the Dodge. Who knows why Chrysler thought the things they did? Covet these cars, because the word on the street right now is that the new company called Stellantis that owns the Chrysler Corporation, thanks to our federal government who gave Chrysler controlling interest to, yes, the people at Fiat. Well, the V8 engine is going to go away in 2 years. No more V8 Chrysler products. And the word with that is no more Dodges and Chrysler cars. At least not the rear-wheel drive cars we're used to seeing. The Jeep will live on because, well, it's a profit and moneymaker. But Plymouth, Dodge, and Chrysler names may become historic because Stellantis, the company made up of 3 companies that failed in the U.S., Fiat, Peugeot, and Citroën, they're going to fix the Chrysler Corporation. They don't understand the American market. So covet those Mopars. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas. The morning edition brought to you by Service Tech Equipment, Irwindale Drag Strip, and Speedway. You have a great day. I'll see you at the drags tonight. Irwindale Drag Strip, Thursday nights, under the lights. It's your place to race. I'm Hot Rod Bob, and you've got gas. Thanks for being a gasaholic.